Welcome to the Unschooling the Mind podcast, where we unravel all of the beliefs and deep conditioning that has been programmed into our mind through decades of infiltration by institutions, media, and governments of whom we no longer trust. In an attempt to heal ourselves and free our children from the same circumstances, we bravely face the rabbit holes that we have been incessantly warned not to explore. My name is Tasha Fishman, and I was a regular Matrix mummy, previously trapped on planet mind control like everyone around me, until the absurdity of the 2020 mandates and public health measures which hit the school system. I took my kids running and never looked back. Unschooling them and myself has led to a new reality. I was forced to shed my old beliefs and birth a new version of myself, a former recovering people pleaser all the way to the Canadian trucker convoy. I didn't know this was in the cards, but here I am today as an unschooling advocate, public speaker, and the founder of the International Unschooling the Mind private community. My life is unrecognizable today, but I wouldn't change a thing. So let's get into it, friends, and unschool our minds together. All right. Okay. So welcome, Shaun Zimmer. It's really exciting. I'm so happy to have you on. I feel like it's been a long time coming. I've seen you in the network of freedom for the last few years and been following your account. I know that you're an Ottawa vet from the trucker convoy. That's probably where you made a huge public splash. So really happy to finally connect with you. I know that you and I have two really big missions. And as I did a little bit of research on what you've been up to the past few years, there was a quote that came to my mind immediately from Mary Lou Henner. And she always said that the most dysfunctional people, given the proper information, become the most natural healers. And I thought of you, and I wasn't thinking of you as a dysfunctional person, but I was thinking about you and I and our path of kind of like the lotus flower of being in the mud and coming up to create something beautiful. And so you've really taken your mess and created it into such a beautiful message throughout the years. So why don't you bring us back a little bit? Because I mean, we have a lot in common. You've got your community. I feel like you're a community builder. Like you were building community even during the mandates in your own home, right? Like a community center. And you have the School of Life, which is a lot about breaking free from your own self-sabotage. I feel like you and I have had a lot of the same coaches, from Tony Robbins to Bruce Lipton to Jason Christoff. So we're kind of coming from the same thing. And so I created this community, the Unschooling the Mind community, because I could see through my own experience that it's one thing to pull your kids out of the system, but we have to clean up our own conditioning as parents in order to really save the kids. Like that's where it all starts. The kids are actually going to be fine if we get them out of the toxic soup. And even if they have to be in the system, we still have to clean up our own conditioning because we are far more programmed than they are. And once we do that and we reconnect with our kids, that's where the magic happens in the unschooling world. So welcome. Can you just please give us a rundown for those that don't know you about how you got to this space?
For having me, Tasha. Hopefully, we share some words of wisdom and empowerment for people listening today. Definitely, I'm helping people everywhere I can, and that's what first led me to this space where I'm at now. You know, I've been an entrepreneur from 17, 18 years old, let's say. Very, dysfunctional past, a lot of chaos. I went through a lot of trials and tribulations, a lot of self-sabotage, very lost in the system, you know, stuck with societal programming, stuck on consumerism, and just stuck on desires, and, you know, a lot of different addictions, drug habits, alcoholism, a lot of things that put me through the ringer. And as I progressed through that journey and started healing and doing the inner work and understanding that inner conflict that I had and what was, you know, just shells and shells, layers and layers over my heart, and how much depression came from that, not being able to actually be in your heart space and be present in the moment. I went from running a construction company and a personal training company to life coaching, we can call it, to helping people start understanding why they are self-sabotaging. You know, a lot of us will, all right, get focused on one area, maybe our fitness. Let's use that for example. But then we hit a new stepping stone, a new milestone of that. But then we start self-sabotaging elsewhere. Maybe we pick up an addiction. Maybe our relationships. We have a hard time not only balancing, but it seems there's this hidden force that wants to down, that we can only rise so high, and we can't elevate all levels sometimes. And that is what brought me into self-sabotage, and learning through a lot of luminaries like Tony Robbins, Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, Jason Christoff, Andy Frisilla, lots of individuals. That list goes on. And I began helping people with not only addictions, relationships, their business, and included with their health. That was always the biggest one. As you're familiar, I'm a big believer in Jason Christoff's 4 primary pillars of strength. The first one being your physical strength. So that's always been a big part of what I do. And as I started going down that path, I got into the online space and became first known for my positive parenting influence. That was a big one. That's what a lot of traction on social media. And then continued with my coaching. And the pandemic came shortly before then. I had came to God. That was a beautiful turning point in my life. And when the pandemic came, wasn't long after I got a calling from the divine, our creator, to take a public stand, a very public stand, and build community. The message was always build community and love thy neighbor as yourself. So I put all my business aside. At that time, I was revamping my online programs and writing a book, put all that off to the side, and opened up free fitness classes, 4 free fitness classes every week. I have a very large backyard on one of the busiest streets in Winnipeg, and it's right next to a bar. And the bar's parking lot goes right up to my fence, and it's actually higher in grade. So not only perfect parking for everybody, but perfect view for the police to come and try to intimidate us, and for us to use our devices and show everybody that no, you can take a stand. So that progressed to such a beautiful thing, community. And I've always been a natural born leader with, my construction company and helping people develop their personal training companies and life coaching companies. Always been just open to helping people, and people have been very drawn to me. They see me rough around the edges and gone through some stuff, and I'm openly sharing that, always very transparent. And the 4 free fitness classes evolved to so much more. We opened up what we call Patriots Academy, which began with a once a week boot camp for kids. And we opened up, I had 2 leaders come to me. So we opened up a Friday yoga, a Monday Muay Thai, and then we started doing these biweekly big bashes. We call them freedom parties, freedom fires. And so it didn't take long when I put that call out on social media for people to get drawn to my home. We turned it into a community center. The police came very shortly after, continuously trying to intimidate me into shutting down, and I held my ground, which inspired a lot of people, brought a lot of people together, gave them hope. And their new tribe, right? I don't think I know. Most people were given an option just a few years ago. Get in alignment with your higher calling. Surrender into this. Might mean you have to let go of your job that you went to school for 10 years, 5 years, invested $100,000 in. Might have to let go of these goals that you have, these dreams that you have set, and surrender into what's actually in alignment. Let go of some friendships, let go of that tight family connection. Maybe even let go of your house, right? We were all given an option of us who leaned into that and surrendered into that divine calling. Beautiful things happen. It's very challenging though. Many people didn't, because you can't really see. And of course, we'll unpack the tribal mind, right? Many people are attached to their tribe and the societal conditioning. That's why we see, sit down in front of the TV, be brainwashed, repetitions. This is what you do, right? Trust the doctors, trust the news anchors, trust the government. And so that progressed to a very public stand, a lot of attention. A lot of people discovered what we were doing, and that actually inspired, if you're familiar with Paulina and Dave, the owners of Monstrosity Burger, a restaurant here in Winnipeg that took a very public stand. They were inspired coming to boot camp to do that. So that was beautiful to see. We were really the only 2 places in Winnipeg that took that stand. And then the focus really became on the kids. I started doing a lot of stuff for the children, a lot of different activity days, a lot of different, ventures out in the woods, and everything we could come up with to just get kids together. And when winter came, the passports were out and a lot of things were shut down. Kids couldn't go to extracurricular activities. So I said, all right, Well, I'm going to use what God's given me. I have maybe a 1,200 square foot home. I cleared out my dining room table and furniture upstairs and made space everywhere. And we said, okay, what can we do here? Well, I know a bit of Muay Thai, so let's get 20 kids downstairs and put foldable tables upstairs and get 10 kids, 15 kids on this side, 15 kids on that side, and we'll rotate every half hour and do Muay Thai downstairs, create a play upstairs. We had, at this time, I had a lot of people that started coming, parents, and that wanted to help. So we did, depending on the age group, we had different ages every day. Monday to Friday, we had 50 kids here every night, and we'd rotate them. There'd be creative play on one side, or being educated by some of the educators we had come in, and then games on the other side, and rotate every half hour, which was such a beautiful thing. It was a wild house here. 50
I
kids
bet.
in this small home Monday to Friday. And then we had, did a lot of events for the homeschooling co-ops, built a rink, a winter wonderland, and did a lot of events for that. Like any day that there was the vax days at school, we put a big notice out to all the schools and gave it to all the parents to send it actually to their principals and the teachers that my kid won't be at school this day, and this is why. And we're actually doing the vax free. I can't remember what we called it, but it was a vax free day for them to come down. And we did a bunch of activities, whether it was skating or face painting or axe throwing, darts, how to start a fire, teaching little things like that. We did a lot of little foraging things, teaching about, animal tracks and whatnot. And so that just kept growing and growing. And then the Ottawa Freedom Convoy came at this point, and I felt the calling to go. And so I got there 2 days after it started. Had some arrangements before. I actually didn't know about the convoy. I took a break off social media and went to the cabin for 2 weeks at this point and let the facilitators take a hold of things over the holidays. And when I got back, I was like, oh, all right, well, I feel called to go. So got there 2 days after, stayed there right until the end. Obviously, that built up a lot of awareness when I went there, but I wasn't involved in any organization of that. It was just, I'm going to be boots on the ground, do whatever I can. And for a while, I was holding a sign that said free hugs, which I used to be a man who was not a fan of hugging. And now I am. Give big bear hugs to everybody and just share my heart. And then, when the Emergency Act came in, my bank account was frozen. So that built up a lot more awareness and continue to inspire people with hope and bring people together when I stayed resilient and just sharing, hey, understand all these what seem to be temporary defeats, these brick walls we hit, it's all for a reason. It's all the divine plan, right? I used to be very angry at the beginning of the pandemic, and I had God, kind of hit me with the spiritual 2x4 one day and said, hey, stop, truly love your neighbor as yourself. Understand, yes, I want you to lead, and I've, give you in the trials and tribulations you've been through to have a little bit of a rougher edge and share the message that many people are sharing, but in a certain way. But stop hating on other people. Stop pointing the finger at them. They're not enabling. I'm enabling. I'm in control of all of this. So stop. Respect their journey. Do your best to lead them to the light. And when that happened, it just changed my life again, really the approach I took. And so it kept progressing through building community and just focusing on answering that calling. And after the convoy, I saw a lot of people that had that weren't there had a lot of lost hope, a lot of anger and despair. So I went ahead and did drawn out maybe for 4 weeks speaking events all the way back from driving back from Ottawa to Winnipeg just to share, hey, we did what we were supposed to do. That was the call, and to stand in peaceful noncompliance, and it was going to NRI police coming in, and to have hope and keep standing and understand every little temporary defeat is all part of that final victory. And come back to Winnipeg. The yard was an absolute mud pit from the thousands of people we had through here, and everything had opened up. Now I was like, all right, what do we do now? A lot of people still wanted me to do the boot camps and parties. So I said, okay, well, we're not going to do it in a big mud pit. And at this point, I was running completely off donations. And so I said, all right, well, if we want to keep doing that, we need to put in AstroTurf. As much as I don't want fake grass, but if I put real grass in, it'll take a month and a half to take, and then it'll just get destroyed again. So I put a fundraiser out for $40,000. Is that what it would have costed me to do AstroTurf properly? And there was crickets. We got $500 in for that. So that was a clear message that that's not the way to go. And I prayed on it and got the message. Hope people get back to the roots of food and gardening and more sovereignty and keep focusing on the kids more than ever. And so we still had the homeschooling co-ops coming out. We do axe nights, and actually did a little kind of club nights somewhat for the teens here. Did some teen nights and whatnot. So I took that $500 and bought a fancy composter that the kids could actually churn, and I had one garden space in the back, and then pivoted on the fundraiser, and we were able to raise enough funds to really convert the yard to a whole yarden, I call it, an
Mm.
entire garden now, and it doubles as the skating rink, the Winter Wonderland. And yeah, so that's in a nutshell. I'm sure I'm missing a lot. We do the Monday night men's groups, and yeah, my online community as well. And we continue with biweekly potlucks here, and then special events that pop up here and there, and have different educators come in to help people where we can.
Wow. Okay, so this is huge. So let's unpack some of that. So the first thing that you said was you had a calling to create community. And, that was the same for me when the mandates were on. I started opening my house on Thursday nights to anybody who wanted to talk about what was going on. And a lot of viewers or a lot of people are saying, what can I do? And where do I go? And they're looking for the lighthouse. And often I'll say, if there's no one to go to, if there's no one to lead, no one to follow, then you lead. You be the lighthouse. You create that right where you are, and that's what you've managed to do. And you remember the wave of people that, and I was one of them. I had my plan B, escaping the country, and a lot of people took off to Costa Rica, and people are still doing it, right? Because there's a lot of fear around the unknown, just like even including with our own self-sabotage. So you managed to really to be a great example of how to do that and create community. And then the second thing was the power, the power of going public, the power of influence. There's an experiment out there. I've seen it. I can't remember what it's called, but it's where the guy's dancing on the hill and everybody's like watching. He just stands up and he starts dancing, and everyone thinks he's weird. But then the second guy joins in and he starts dancing, and they start dancing together. And then all of a sudden everybody gets up, and it's like the power. The thing is about the power of the second guy. So,
Mm.
so you had said, I think you mentioned in some previous podcasts that you were also influenced by other people. I don't know if it was that character Ian down in the
Mm-hmm.
States. Is that true? You
But
felt that you were influenced, and what's your ideas about the power of that kind of answering the calling and how that relates? Yeah.
yeah, just even if you take a stand or you provide some advice for somebody or some inspiration, and it's just to one person, but you never know what that one person might do, right?
Mhm.
So watched Ian Smith take his stand stateside, and at that time I was wishing I had a storefront to open and show people you can take a public stand. And it didn't cross my mind until they said you couldn't have more than one person over even in your yard. I said, whoa, I used to teach boot camps. I have the perfect yard for boot camps. Let's do free boot camps. And that's the calling I had. So yeah, that all credit to Ian for inspiring me. And just as I said, that rippled to Monstrosity Burger, Dave and Paulina opening up their doors, and they took a very public stand. It was, their place was booming. It was all with the whole freedom community. The whole parking lot was lined up. It was just such a beautiful thing. It's yeah, the power of just one person can be so great.
Yeah, and really just answering that inner calling from whatever divine source,
Mm.
our creator. If we just do that in our own way, it just opens doors, and we give other people permission to do the same. I mean, I certainly was the same way. My first post was May of 2020. I'll never forget, like, the hate and the vitriol that I received from friends, family, business acquaintances, all of it. But I was doing that because for a couple weeks I had been watching somebody else post counter narrative messaging, and so it prompted me to start looking into it, and I just haven't stopped. But there's always that rite of passage that we have to go through, of burning through the ideals of outside approval, right? We have to walk that fire alone and through the coals to the other side, where we basically burn the old version, the old life of ourself that we had, and we come into this new courage, like this new energy. So you
Mhm.
you had also mentioned about showing up at the convoy, not being part of any organization. I too, I every day I'd wake up and say, okay, God, if you want me to be here, you better make it really clear. And I was there the entire time too. I ended up being in the war room back at, the hotels with the doctors. And I'm so surprised my bank account didn't get frozen. because all of the names of the hotels, we put them in my name because I was just this one little mom, this nobody who showed up, and we were like, okay, she's safe, let's do that. So it was just wild that we've actually been through that. And lastly, one of the things I wanted to bring up that you said was you talked about the force about self-sabotage. So in my awakening, what I realized is here we are fighting this on a macro level, the government who is, using coercion, using abusive tactics, um, manipulating, lying. And for me, what I was realizing when I had my kids at home was, where was I doing that in my own life? So taking what was going on, this big stance, was really important to do. But then there came a threshold where I realized I have to bring all of this stuff that I don't want and start working on it inside myself, inside my own family, bring it back to the smaller concentric circles, right? Where do I coerce my kids? And this is when I was attempting to homeschool at the kitchen table, and it was an epic fail. And I was trying to coerce them, and I was pushing my agenda onto them. And so I had to find a new path. And luckily for me, unschooling became that path of awakening for me. Um, but yeah, for you, you talked about this force that happens when we go from one thing to the other, right? So maybe you clean up your diet and your exercise and you have more capacity and more agency to be a better parent, but then you're still drinking on the weekends and you're still doing this. And then that becomes a little bit bigger and deeper and or maybe you quit nicotine or something and then you end up eating into the sugar and diving into that. So what do you describe? What is this force and how do people combat it or even become aware of it? Because it does seem that there's this sequential thing that happens.
Yeah, the best description I would give is the tribal mind. And to answer your question about, burning the old self to take that stand, that was one area that I had been primed for, as I was very much to myself, a very lone wolf, other than the interactions that I had on social media and my one-on-one clients that I was coaching through a device like this. So I was prepared for that. And actually, what brought me my tribe was building that community, which was such a beautiful process. So I had one thing set up for me for that made it a lot easier. So when that hate came down, I've been a rebel my whole life. It was never too pressing for me, too much weight on my shoulders. Now I will say the weight did add up on my shoulders with how many people came to me with their problems. Now that I was opening up, we ended up opening up a Thursday night therapy class in the community of my home here because there's just so much, and I couldn't handle everything that people were bringing to me. Especially the biggest one was the parents who had kids who actually didn't want to get in line, but ended up getting in line because of the university and their investment in that. And they just weren't willing to let go of those dreams, right? And actually get in tune with that calling. So that was difficult. And I actually started escaping from that using alcohol, and I'll unpack that. And that was a hard hit for me because at this point I'd already been, helping people with alcohol addiction, right? I was already in that space. So when I let that get a hold of me again, that was a very hard hitting realization. And then I was escaping from just all the weight of everything going on, all the people leaning on me, and just the nonstop schedule. We had an event every day. And what really the weight on me, and we'll talk about the alcohol a little bit, and that comes in the tribal mind, was the hate I received actually within the freedom community when I made that to really come out of a place of love and just I need to start leading more by example. Yeah, strong stance is necessary and needed. And I love how you say lighthouse. That was my biggest message with those speaking events that I went on, sharing just be a lighthouse. And actually, when I got to the church in Barrie that I spoke at, they didn't know that I was sharing this message, and they hand me a button with a lighthouse on it, and they have this big lighthouse statue that I ended up speaking in front of. And when I had that speech, it wasn't me speaking. I was for the divine, I'll say Christ. And I remember actually opening up a Q&A at the end. An individual said, "That's all fine and dandy, Shaun, but when do we pick up arms?" And I immediately said, "We don't. We follow the path of Christ." And I can't believe I said that because I am often one, especially in those days, that would turn to violence when there's a time for that. And of course, I still battle with that. If somebody entered my home, it's a different story. But so to your question, the tribal mind is what I would say. And the easiest, description on this, I love actually Christoph's. I've adopted his perspective with bodyguard number 1 and bodyguard number 2. And, we're still discovering a lot about the conscious and subconscious mind. and really the, the interactions between them. But we can look at, on average, it's believed that on average, humans live out of their conscious mind 5% of the time, and out of their subconscious mind 95% of the time. And the subconscious mind is a series of programs, automatic behaviors that we pick up from our environment, what we're analyzing in repetition, right? We're tribal beings. The easiest way to really look at this in perspective is a child. When they're watching their parents and they start acting out the motions to learn to walk, that's so they can fit in, right? We are drawn, we have this innate desire, this safety mechanism to adopt behaviors of our tribe so we can fit in and survive and thrive, because power is in numbers. We're tribal beings. And that continues our whole life, right? You see the child do that with walking, with talking, clapping, right? It continues. And that never stops for us. We're continuously scanning the environment. And it's believed that our conscious mind, scanning the environment around 50 bits of information per second, the subconscious mind is scanning over 10 million bits of information per second, visual and audio cues, looking for what's repetition. That's why advertising is so powerful. And so many people don't think it works on them. Have you ever looked into the conformity experiments, even on just how the tribal effect happens with people in elevators and the ding test in the doctor's office? It's wild. I highly suggest checking them out. So we are drawn to pick up these behaviors that fit in with our surroundings. So that's why it's so very important to focus on setting healthy boundaries with everything you consume. That old saying, you're an average of who you surround yourself with. That's true. And in the day and age we have with technology as well, what you're listening to, what you're watching, all the subliminal messages in the background on the movies and the screens you're watching, all the alcohol drinks that maybe you're not picking up with your conscious mind, but in the background, your subconscious mind is scanning everything and saying, this is the tribe we live in. I'm looking to adopt behaviors with that. So that's a big one. And in reference to your question, when it comes to, okay, I'm elevating in one area here, but then all of a sudden there's this hidden force that's self-sabotaging. That's often connected to your tribe that you grew up around, whether your parents or your primary care providers, and as well the tribe that you have most close to you now, because we want to fit in. And that means adopting the behaviors and not rising up above them too much, right? You don't want to rise up too much because you'll be cast out, right? And many people probably resonate with this when they have done that and they've seen their peers around them really not actually want the best for them and start getting jealous and start putting them down. So the tribal mind knows that. So let's say you grew up in a family of alcoholics. I see this often with people I work with, whether it's alcohol or a different drug, and they had something happen where it was just so traumatizing that they swore off alcohol and they weren't going to touch alcohol. But then they pick up a really bad, unhealthy eating habit or a cocaine addiction. And that, as strange as it sounds, I believe, and through the research I've looked through and what I see with the people I work with, that's a subconscious tribal mind's way of saying, hey, I know I don't have the alcohol addiction, but look, I'm cutting myself down here. Do you guys love me? Do you accept me? Am I part of the tribe? That's part of it. And especially the what you grew up around, the tribe right now, and then all the advertising and everything. So really important to take a real account of your surroundings consistently and outweigh, the negatives with the positives everywhere you can. And that's why, as similar to you, I made that shift. Like, let's go inward. What can I do? It's, health. When we look at the prefrontal cortex, the most evolved part of our brain that is more associated with the conscious mind in a way, is in charge of long-term thinking, willpower, goal setting, conscious thought. The subconscious mind is more attached to the limbic system, which is our emotional response center that is attached to our stress response for short-term impulsive decision-making, which is there for a reason. They're both there for a reason. So we call the conscious mind, or the prefrontal cortex, bodyguard number one, very ready to take charge and think long-term, and bodyguard number two, more associated with the limbic system and the subconscious mind. And bodyguard number two is programmed to listen to authority in the tribe as well, right? Tribal leaders. And how are we programmed to perceive tribal leaders? People on the TV. If you're on the TV, instantly we've been programmed to think you're somebody of significance in the tribe. So we're more prone to listen to the messages that you send. Doctors, Dr. Coat, police officers, right? Government, teachers. We're programmed to see these as tribal leaders. So we're more drawn to adopt what they're telling us to do so we can fit in with the tribe. And now, again, that's attached to the stress response system with our limbic system. So anybody can, tout if you're in a relationship, and you have your spouse talking about something they're unhappy about with somebody else, and you're most often going to be there for support, instantly guiding them, sharing some wisdom. But often When it is turned on you, when they're in disagreement with you, you get in that emotional reactive response, right? Highlights feelings of unworthiness, your stress triggers, and you get emotionally reactive instead of actually providing the same support initially that you would if it was about somebody else. And of course, that's not always the case, but we do often see in relationships. So the stress response that's attached to the limbic system, which puts you in this more emotional response center, right? It did serve a purpose, especially once upon a time when a bear is chasing us in the woods. We need to have certain systems shut down and have energy and blood flowing in certain areas so we can run, so we can fight or flight or freeze. And that's a big part of it as well. But we have the same stress response if we're getting chased by a bear or if we're soaking up toxins, if we're drinking alcohol, if we're consuming these seed oils, if we're putting toxins on our skin and the lotions and the makeup supplies, right? It triggers our stress response. So chronic stress, you'll be more in your limbic system, meaning you're more susceptible to having bodyguard number two taking over, who has your best interest at heart. But in the world we live in today, bodyguard number two is scanning not the healthiest behaviors to adopt, right? And so there's a lot of different work you can do. And Bruce Lipton is huge on this, right? With how can we line up our subconscious? Great. We want to be in our conscious as much as possible. Mindfulness practices, right? Meditation, gratitude is all going to help you be in the present moment more conscious. But how can we reprogram our subconscious mind to act out behaviors that line up with our conscious wishes and desires? So hopefully that answers your question, a little long drawn out, but that is the tribal mind. I see that as and attached from past and present.
That's the force. Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I often say like school is on so many levels is such bullshit when you start researching it, but honestly like the one thing is that they don't teach you about the subconscious mind. This part of
Mm,
the brain that loves us so much that picks up all this repetitive content far more than the conscious part of the brain and whatever is repetitive. So, like you said, if you come from an alcoholic tribe, if you come from the smoking tribe or the toxic food takeout tribe, you're going to, or you can come from the tribe of the health and fitness, right? So it's so important that we clean up our own act as parents because we're so focused. If you say, "Oh, got to pull the kids out of school, we got to homeschool. What kind of curriculum should I give them? They're going to be, behind. We have to do all these things." And no, no, we don't have to do all those things. We need to take a breath. We need to unhook from the system, like everything that you just mentioned for perceived authority figures is the problem to this entire con job, right? We have been conditioned in school to believe that we have to listen to these perceived authority figures, the teachers, the people in government, the white coats, all of the stuff. And because of that, that's why we're in this mess. So we have to unschool our own mind. One of the things I've heard you say in previous podcasts is let's normalize sobriety.
mm,
And I mean, yeah, let's normalize sobriety. And what you were saying about how friends and family, it's the tall poppy syndrome. So I can see how when you stop one thing, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to quit drinking. But look, I'm going to go out for a cheesecake and I eat all this stuff with you guys, or I'm going to do whatever. You still like me, right? Like I'm still, and I often say to people, you want to see how much you're conditioned and how much people are conditioned to try to quit drinking. Just,
mm,
just quit drinking and talk to your friends and family and see how that goes. For those of us who have come through the other side, uh, it's incredibly painful. And you realize quickly, or go on a diet. And how many of your friends are like, you're looking really skinny.
mhm,
I don't know. What are you doing there? Are you eating enough? Like it just goes on and on and on. And they're basically just saying, I miss you. Are you leaving the tribe? I don't want you to leave the tribe. Are you leaving the tribe? Are you holding up a mirror? Do I have to look at my own shit? Like, I don't want to look at this shit, right?
yeah. Crabs in a bucket mentality, right? The one crab tries to climb out and the other crab is bringing them down. Like often people can resonate with this who've quit drinking and the friends say, oh, come on, just have one drink. Just have one
Hmm.
drink. Have one
Hmm.
drink. Whether they're conscious of it or not, that's their subconscious, screaming that I feel inferior to you and it's highlighting a problem that I have and I want you to be in this with me because this is what I've
That's it.
chosen with
That's
me
it.
because with you and I want you here in this hole with me.
And I think that's really good to unpack so that when you're in those situations, you can remember that. Because at the very beginning, when you first try to get away from these things, the pressure is enormous. Like I remember it too, just being like, oh my God, I've got to go. How am I going to explain that to these people? How am I going to? But I mean, now I'm so embodied in it. It's
Mm-hmm.
funny. Like an old friend last weekend, I hadn't seen him in a long time. Like, just come on, just have one, And I said, no, no, I know I quit. I'm not drinking anymore. Here, I've got a drink right here, my soda, or whatever. And he's like, God, I hate quitters, I,
Mm-hmm.
I hate quitters, but he loves me. But like, that's just, but once I'm able to, what we just said, realize that that's really just him. It's just him. He just doesn't want to miss me, but I can show him that we're still connected and I can be here for maybe 2 hours till he starts repeating himself and then I got to bail. And by then he won't remember anyway. So get into us with us a little bit about how this is so pivotal. And I didn't think we'd be talking about this because I have gone back to the sabotage tool shed as well through my practice. So explain to us. So you're feeling this pressure. There's a lot of problems with the freedom movement, right? Like I have been involved in many of the organizations, from the Million Children to this to that to Taking Back Our Freedoms, so many things, and watch them implode, whether it's from purposeful outside influence, or it's personalities, or it's because we're governing like the old model, the authoritative kind of model, and
Mhm.
not a Socratic method of governance. Um, but tell us about how you went back.
Mm.
You went back and you had that kind of, was it because of that, all that emotion of being kind of turned on by your new tribe?
Yeah, there was no, it started before that. It was really starting to be the weight of everybody leaning on me. And to back up, I went from having one person over at my house maybe once a month to, upwards to 1,000 people a week through this home. And it was not only so the people that I had not being used to, right? I had built a life that I really didn't want to be around people. And then everybody dumping their problems on me. It was just a lot. It was a lot of weight piling up on my shoulders. The hate that came from people outside the community really didn't bother me too much until actually one event where I was, intoxicated, and I had somebody come around the property here, and I lost my cool on them. That's a whole other story we can unpack. So I got back in the shed with the alcohol and as well the tribal mind, right? So we were doing these biweekly freedom parties, and alcohol was very much involved. Everybody was drinking, right? So this was now my tribe, right? And I was the tribe leader in a way, right? And I was starting to adopt the behaviors that they were bringing in to the tribe. And so that really picked up and spiraled down and started knocking me down. Thankfully, I nipped it in the butt fairly quickly. When I caught on, actually, that incident that happened where I lost my cool on the individual was a big eye opener. As I know, if I wasn't drinking, I would have just walked away. And the the tribal mind is so powerful, and obviously the weight, right? The inner conflict. We need to release it. We need to sit with everything. And as you said, for you as well, community has always been the biggest thing. And I resonate what you just mentioned about all the different movements and in the freedom community. When I got wind, I had no interest in protesting at all. There was marches going on and protests going on in Winnipeg, and I had no interest in it until many people in the community said, "Hey, Shaun, I think you really need to help here because there's some egos getting conflicted, and people aren't actually, rising together and bringing more people together." So that's when I started doing. There was a protest at the Forks here in Winnipeg, and there was a protest at the Legislative, and so that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to organize a protest where we start at the one at the Forks and do a march and get everybody combined with the one at the Legislative, and started pushing forward on that. And I definitely, what you spoke of was highlighted, and a lot of that was projected on me. People thought I did everything for just my presence and my ego. I always said, hated or praised, I'm here, doing what I'm feeling called to. And I'm not one that's shy to admit to any failures and where I made a mistake and could have done better. Hated or praised, I'm big on the Toltec wisdom, Don Miguel Ruiz, right? The four
Mhm.
agreements. Amazing book if you haven't, very short read. One of them being don't take anything personally. And
Mhm.
most people, common sense for hate, just knowing like that's a projection from other people, but as well praise. Everybody calling you a hero and all these different things. You know who you are. You know where
Mhm.
you're at. You know where it's at. You know what you're doing. You know what you're not doing. Don't let other people identify you, right? Stand true to yourself, right? And keep speaking your truth. The amount of truth we know. We only know a partial truth, of course. We don't see the whole thing on actually what's going on, what this world is. So yeah, the self sabotage shed when I got back in there. And if anybody doesn't know the reference, look at the self sabotage shed as a shed most of us Canadians and people around the world have in their backyard. And instead of rakes and shovels and screws and whatnot hung up, you have your alcohol, your TV, your cocaine, your marijuana, your nicotine, too much caffeine, whatever it is. And we get stuck hanging out inside that shed, just hanging out in the shed. And we need to get out. And often when you get inspired to get outside that shed, it's like you have one of those exercise bungee cords attached to you in the shed, and you only get so far until it stretches out and smacks you right back in. And that's all right. Get back out, lick your wounds, get back out, keep running. You'll keep fraying that a little bit, and finally it'll snap. But
Yeah.
somehow you can, if you lose consciousness about really where you came from, you can land back in the shed, and that's where it's really important. Using our nervous system to our advantage. pain, right? We steer away from what's more painful. So do your best to be conscious of the pain that's caused from these addictions or self-sabotaging behaviors, if that's what we're going to talk about, to know that there's more pain associated with you going back in that hole and back in that shed, and be conscious of that, whether it's a journal, whether it's, artwork, notes on your mirror, whatever you can to keep conscious of that is very, very important. So yeah, I've been sober now from alcohol almost 2 years. I never plan on drinking again. I removed marijuana almost 2 years ago as well. I used to be on TRT. I removed that, and yeah, everything that was get in the way. And all for you if you can consciously utilize these different substances in respectful manners. Now, of course, alcohol is ethanol, so can it be healthy at all? I don't think so, but if you can be an individual who chooses to have a drink once in a while, one of the rare people who do, great, good for you, right? But for most people, and even marijuana, there's a lot of good things that I've seen with marijuana that can help a lot of people, but most people aren't conscious with it and are abusing it, and it is not doing them well. I often suggest for people to try the stoner mentality test out, and you can do this with alcohol and everything, right? Sit down, do a 30-minute meditation, sober, journal your thoughts, and then go and smoke your joint or get drunk, whatever it is. Sit down, meditate for 30 minutes, journal your thoughts, and then do that same process going for a walk in the woods. Do that same process going to a market or somewhere, or some in your relationships where you have to show up. If that's where you use these substances, journal it all and see what the difference is. And most often, you're going to notice when you're sober, you're much less critical of yourself. You're much less, feelings of unworthiness, limiting beliefs, the heightened pain that you've already even seemingly processed, but you're still going over it and having those emotions flood your body with it, right? And our feeling state is so important. Now, it's very important we sit with our feelings and process them and do our best to redefine them when the time is right. And so we can move on and replace that, bad feeling we have from hard experiences with gratitude, right? Everything's a gift for us. We often don't see the final harvest of what that gift is, but no matter what, you can know, especially if you've gone over so many obstacles, that everything will help you when you overcome, to have more empathy, understanding, compassion for other people, which is huge. You have that, you massive ripples, right? You can hold space for people, and often there's a lot more that comes from it. You taking a stand from what you learned, that compassion, and that impacts one person who ends up changing tens of millions of people's lives.
Mm-hmm. I think the greatest thing too is like people will put someone like yourself on a pedestal, right? Like you've got it all figured out. Look at you, you've got this business, you're the king of the thing, and you're actually able to share, because I feel like we're all just walking each other home. You know what I mean? And we're all just in like different, like it's like we're all in an airport. We've come from different, destinations, but we're going to the same place somewhere, and we've had these different journeys. And for you to be able to say like, yeah, you know what, I went back to that and I was in the shed for a bit and I figured it out quick. And it just, it's liberating, because I see that happening, but then I see people just hiding it or feeling that imposter syndrome. So just you even sharing that and that vulnerability is so powerful. So thank you for that. Really. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
I give credit to, I should interject on credit for the men's group that we host on Monday nights for that. I've been last, 15 years almost, I've been in the space of sharing my hard times and what I've gained from it. But that's after I persevered and overcame. The men's group we do on Monday nights, that's sharing where I'm at. And that's a
mhm,
whole other ball game. That's being really vulnerable, right? And men are taught not to be that, right?
mhm,
Off. I think that's why so many men have heart attacks, because we're so closed off in the heart space, right?
mhm.
So I give credit to the men's group for really being able to be even more so vulnerable and sharing. I'm transparent, always have been, but I would steer away from things I was battling at that current moment, but there is a fine line, a boundary that needs to be set there as well when you take a leadership role, right? If
Mhm.
you are really challenged with something, well, sometimes you actually do need to keep that in the back burner, have a certain group where you can open up about that so you can practice and get that off and, get wisdom, get advice in return. But if you're in a leadership role, there is times where there needs to be boundaries with that on what you're actually sharing, because people are leaning on you. And when you share some really hard thing you're challenged with, that might, have the community fall apart, right?
Have an
And what,
impact on them.
yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so, okay, this is a great segue to the men because that was one of my questions I wanted to get in with you. I mean, you obviously just your voice, just, your stamina, you like an alpha male is how I would describe you. And I know that there's a lot of, there's great guys and I've met them from the start. There's really great guys out there since the beginning speaking out and doing this stuff, but definitely not enough. It's been the women and the grandmas at the beginning that, like I often say at some of these protests the first 2 years, like, man, if we just had 10,000, 5,000 men showing up at the Parliament building instead of, grandmas and the babies and the things, that we'd have a different response. It might be the same response with the horses that we got, but just to say, what are your thoughts about the men? I know, and you and I come from the same background of understanding that there's been an attack psychologically and spiritually and emotionally, even physically on the male, on the female, and now the children. So it's like everyone's, it's rapid fire on everyone. But because you are a man, because you're a leader in this field, like what are your thoughts on this? And, where are the men? Because I still see a lot, but I mean, I feel like this could be over. And
Mm.
then if there was, an awakening more. And do you see it coming? Do you see a rise in men?
Absolutely. I see a rise in everything. And that's where one of the, I think, most important messages to give everybody is to have that faith and open up space for it, right? When we don't have faith in that, when we don't see it, when we don't believe it, we're very powerful. We're co-creators with the divine. If you're into the Bible, there's how many scriptures where, Jesus says, you'll do greater things than I, for I go to the Father, say to this mountain, move, and believe that it'll move, and it'll move. So we are very, very powerful. In the beginning, there was God, and in the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was God. Our words are powerful, our thoughts, our feelings, the law of vibration. I'm a huge advocate, and I believe our Creator created these universal laws, and we need to use them to our advantage. So just understand that power and faith, and choosing faith over fear. And that's something I battle with sometimes, even with the divine interventions I've had. When I got really up on arms about some of the stuff with the drag queen story times and stuff like that, I wasn't being that lighthouse. I came in at it where I was just like, right. And that was great. The people who believed me already were like, yeah, right. But the people who didn't, I'm coming on so aggressively. They don't want that. You got to think of it
Mm-hmm.
like a sit, right? So it was just causing more divide. So I
Mm-hmm.
realized, oh, what God showed me, okay, I need to be a lighthouse. I need to lead that example. And also opening up space for it, right? Believing when you believe, even in your partnership, right? Like stop holding the identity of something. Now, of course, there's healthy boundaries that need to be put in place, especially with abusive people. But when you can let go of the old identity that you've attached to somebody, you open up space for them to actually change, right? And your body language will speak that, your tone of voice will speak that, right? And if you can think of it like a sales dance, right? Sell people, right? How can you sell people? Well, be genuine, get to know them, connect with them and their interests, use their pain points and their love points to your advantage, and as well lead by example, right? So we need to focus on our health as one of the biggest things, treating this body as a holy temple, right? Instead of just fluoride in the water, the seed oils, all that. How about you just live a really beautiful, healthy life and talk to people about how beautiful and good you're feeling? Because they'll want
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
especially as you're interested in them and in what they're into, because we like people like us, right? So that's sales 101. So in terms of the men, I agree with you. In the beginning when I started the boot camps, it was mostly women, other than a few women who brought their husbands along. And the public exposure for that and the parties and whatnot brought a lot of men down. I think some for the wrong reasons, probably just to meet women. But hey, at least I got some of them taking a stand and coming together. And I see that changing big time for sure. It has been a big attack on men, as you know. We could unpack that. I think most people are aware of that, right? It's just that little bit by little bit, all the things going on and attacking men when they would, stand up and say something. So they, all right, whatever, you guys just do your thing over there. Not realizing the more we said that, that was going to snowball and become something very powerful that eventually would have all of these rules and regulations coming in place in our children's schools and in our lives all over the place that would end up being, holy smokes. Well, drink it away, right? Men have been taught to close off, not share that stuff, just close off to it and pick up the bottle, right? Keep
Mm-hmm.
smoking pot, just close off to it, keep working, right? And of course, all the inflation and everything that's rising up, just making it so hard for people to actually have that space. So I will say there's men coming together for sure, more and more and more men. And one of the biggest things is men need to take that stand and be those leaders that we need them to be. They need to do the inner work, which sounds, very tutu to a lot of men, right? Been taught that. And then you do that inner work and resolve that inner conflict, come in their heart space, learn how to be in the present moment. And the most powerful thing a man can do is love. love, truly be a love leader, protector, and provider.
Mm-hmm.
And remove all the perceptions and victim mindset we have, even though so many people don't want to admit that. When you're lacking forgiveness, it's a victim mindset. You're holding on to what you believe somebody else should have done. So learn to process that, connecting to God, call it what you want. That bothers some people when I say that. And I know you want to give credit maybe to Jesus or something, whatever your beliefs are, but I try to use a wider terminology on that. Well, one, we look at the original scriptures, and it's not God, it's Elohim, Yeshua, all these different names. But why I do that is because some people aren't drawn to that yet. And when we keep a little broader, I trust that when you start devoting yourself, treating this body as the holy temple, looking to serve selflessly, coming into your heart space, God will show you what's true. Right? That's between you and him. I don't need to intervene on that. And often when I share these messages, I'll have Christians specifically most often come in and that's the devil's work. You're saying, it can be the divine or anything. No, it's Jesus. And what I will point out to anybody listening, I just want to say, and I respect you and your views, and I love you. But those comments, the people that I'm trying to, that's great. You have that relationship. You're good. You're rocking and rolling. Keep diving into that. Keep steering into that. Keep following that guidance. But those comments, the people I'm trying to speak to that aren't answering that calling yet, see those comments on that post, and it's pushing them away from connecting with Christ. And that's what happened to me until I had a divine intervention. And God told me, hey, I know you can't get behind the biblical text. That's okay. That was 4 years ago. And I just got a message. Okay, I want you to start reading the text now and start actually understanding it and look to the original languages and start helping break down some of these barriers. So that's really one of my biggest focuses right now is how can we break down the divide of religion? I don't mean break down religion, but the divides that we have. And so in that process, a little bit of a off track on the question, what I was referring to on that inner work, need to hold space for men to step into that leadership role and understand that they're needed. And that message is getting out there now, right? Because the message for how many years was, no, we don't need men being that strong, coming in hard, taking the lead, right? We're empowering women, right, which we want to do, but we each have our own gifts, right? And y'all are the super beings here. You create life, right? And you're the nurturers more than any man can ever be. Of course, we still can be, but it is coming into our divine roles and stepping into that and complementing each other and holding space for each other to come into that. And we're seeing that more and more. More people are starting to talk about the masculine and feminine, which I will mention. A lot of people are, I think, getting off track with that and, taking people down the wrong path, but that's they're well intended. So, and as well, you were talking, I'll just go back again about some of the issues in the freedom community. I think one of the biggest ones is the intermediary traps, right? It's not like these forces that have been coming into play didn't realize that a lot of people will wake up and see it, right? So I think there's a certain degree of ridiculousness that's planted purposely for us to get stuck staring at the problems and just the problems and in a reactive state, which is going to heighten our stress response. Bodyguard number 2 taking over. Even though we're conscious of the bullshit, we're still going to be more susceptible to the alcohol or the shitty food or just taking the edge off, however you do, and not actually being in that conscious willpower, long-term thinking, okay, I need to heal. I need to step up. I need to protect and provide. Yes, that's not okay, but there's other routes to take to be a lighthouse and to lead by example and actually bring people together in community to rise above this. Right. So be careful of those intermediary traps. And I see a lot of it. And I even see a lot of people, especially with social media, getting addicted to the dopamine hit of that. Right. Because what gets engagement in the freedom community. Right. It's something I stay away from since before the convoy. You won't see me post about a lot of the BS. And it doesn't mean that doesn't need to have a light shine on it, but there's a lot of people shining that light on it. So other than recently talking about the court case, you won't see me posting about things. It's just health. Treat your bodies, understand the tribal mind, your surroundings. Here's what you can do. You go around my house. There's a reason I have motivational artwork everywhere. There's a reason my whole fridge is covered with these little magnets that are all uplifting sayings because the subconscious mind is scanning that. There's a reason I got certified in hypnosis. I don't do hypnotherapy, but I create self-hypnosis tracks for people because that's a very powerful way to reprogram the subconscious mind. Repetition, right?
100%. Yeah. Well, going back to what you said about the divine religion. I don't think any Christians are going to come on here because I'm Jewish, and most people that follow me know that. And I totally believe in Christ consciousness, and I love Jesus, and I think it's wonderful. And just like I said, I feel like we're all showing up at one destination from different terminals at an airport. That's kind of how I see it, And when people get hung up on the semantics of religion or anything else, they're stuck,
Mhm.
because that's not what we came here. If you believe that, God is our creators, our loving father, mother, however you describe it, and then you believe they're going to judge you because you didn't say the right word or you didn't portray the thing. I mean, it's just you're under mind control, like the rest of it when it
That's
comes to school, right?
that's ex- been blessed to have many divine interventions, and there's never been a highlight on name, and it's always been the one concrete thing. And of all the guidance that I've received, it's always been faith, Shaun. My calling for you is not fear; it's faith, and it's
Mm-hmm.
nothing for love. Love that is unexplainable in words, right? And yeah, Christ. I'm a huge Christ is the way. And as he says that, though, I don't believe when you read the scripture and it says, I am the only way, that means the physical being, not an outside savior. That
Mm-hmm.
means process, this archetype, this play is the way. It's the only
Mm-hmm.
way of taking care of your demons. Go into the desert for 40 days, 40 years, face your
Yeah.
demons, evil, overcome, get enlightened, meaning connect with the divine to some degree, share that. Speak your truth. Don't use the Lord's name in vain. What does that mean to me? Well, at the beginning of the Bible, in the beginning there was God, and in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God. Could that be his name? Speaking truth. If you don't speak truth, if you hold back on truth, if you say falsehoods, that's using the Lord's name in vain, in my perspective. So share that and do so no matter what, having faith that you are just, this physical life is just a fraction of what you actually are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're crucified for speaking that truth, that's okay. Have faith. That's the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual side of faith that I see. And then the physical side of faith in terms of letting go of your desires and the goals that you set, which most of them aren't even yours. They came from societal programming
Mm-hmm.
of that and surrender into God's calling and have faith that it will be so much more beautiful if you do that, which is very challenging, right? Because we have all these steps we built, understanding, okay, I want to have this. These are the steps I can take since I've looked at other people making it happen. Okay, I have this, force inside of me that's telling me to go this way. And it's, putting a step that looks like shit or my biggest fear, insignificant, a total downgrade. When we steer into that, when you're connected and you're treating this body as the holy temple, that's where you're getting guided to. You step into that, beautiful things happen, right? And that's what I've been doing. And yeah, there's never been any emphasis on name, nothing like that. It's been nothing but beautiful. And a lot of people, I speak on this a lot because that's my guide for everybody. My brand, the best way to break free. Well, what's the best way to break free? To me, if I was to sum that up into 3 words, to feel whole, to be present in your heart, to have your heart opened up, all the layers cracked off, right? To be present in your heart and answering your highest calling in every moment, present in the moment. Then, of course, thousands or at least hundreds of things will fall under that on how you can achieve that, depending on what you're facing, right? So it's always answering your higher calling. That's where my guidance is on everybody, but I don't tell you what to believe. That's between you and your creator. And I trust that the more you step into that, the more you will see more truth and get guided and start answering that calling. And we can start breaking down the divides that we see amongst so many, where I think is many people missing their mark.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And I can see that you're someone who's very impeccable with your word, which is, I think, the fourth agreement. So I love that.
Yeah.
And that was a perfect segue to end here in the podcast. I try to keep it to an hour. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to continue on with our Q&A with our people here in the community and dive a little into the homeschooling world and what your thoughts are around that. So thank you so much. And I will have all of Shaun's way to contact him, follow him, his website, and where he's at in the show notes. So thank you, Shaun.
And my pleasure, Tasha.
Thank you so much, friends. If you like the content that I am producing amongst a sea of censorship, please like, review, and share. If you are looking for support to pull your kids from the system and start your own unschooling the mind journey with an international online community of like-minded souls who are doing the same thing as you, head over to my website at tashafishman.com for all the details. To create strong communities right where you are, it starts with you. Thank you. Clear eyes, open heart, can't lose. See you next time.